It hurts too much. It's my first night. The giant virgin bride whispered, her voice breaking in the firelit darkness as her muscular arms trembled against the fur throws. But the lonely rancher Calhoun Ridgway, who hadn't touched a woman in 8 years, broke down crying. Not because his giant bride was in pain on her first night. Not because her powerful, virgin body was too much for him to handle. He broke down crying because Magnolia, this magnificent, towering woman with arms thick as timber and shoulders broad as a plow horse, was everything he'd waited for. Everything he thought he'd lost the right to have when he buried his wife and daughter 8 years ago. The giant bride whispered again, "It hurts." Her first night stretched before them like an impossible mountain to climb. But why was this lonely rancher weeping? What made this virgin bride strong enough to break a man in half, whisper in fear? And why did he keep saying she was everything he'd waited for when her first night was filled with pain instead of pleasure? The cabin smelled like pine smoke and lavender soap. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across rough wooden walls. Outside, Montana wind howled through the mountains like a lonely wolf. Magnolia lay there in her tan wedding dress, still half-buttoned, her copper hair spread across the fur like flames. Her green eyes were wide with confusion and fear. She was 6 feet 4 inches of pure strength, shoulders that could carry a full-grown calf, hands that could split firewood without breaking a sweat, arms carved from years of farm labor that no proper lady should ever have to do. She was magnificent, terrifying, beautiful, and she was his wife. Calhoun knelt beside her, his weathered hands hovering near her face, wanting to touch her but afraid he'd somehow break this moment. Tears streamed down his sun-darkened cheeks, disappearing into his beard. "I'm sorry," Magnolia choked out, trying to sit up. "I'm sorry I'm not what you expected. I should have told you in my letters, about my size, about how I'm built. Every man who's ever seen me has walked away, and now on our first night, I can't even—" "Stop," Calhoun whispered, his voice cracking. He pressed his forehead against her shoulder, that powerful, solid shoulder, and sobbed harder. "Please stop." She went rigid beneath him, and he felt her entire body tense like she was preparing to be struck. That's what broke him completely. This strong, beautiful woman expected pain, expected rejection, expected to be told she was wrong somehow. "You don't understand," he managed between ragged breaths. "Nola, you don't understand what you are." "I'm too much," she said flatly. And he heard years of hurt in those 3 words. "I've always been too much." Calhoun lifted his head and looked at her, really looked at her. In the firelight, tears tracked down her freckled face. Her jaw was clenched. Her eyes held the kind of pain that comes from a lifetime of being unwanted. "You're not too much," he said fiercely. "You're everything. Everything I thought died 8 years ago when I put my wife and baby girl in the ground. Everything I convinced myself I didn't deserve. Everything I've been too afraid to even pray for." Magnolia's breath hitched. "But I hurt. On our first night, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I know it's not this. It's not supposed to hurt this much, and you shouldn't be crying. Men don't cry on their wedding night." "This man does," Calhoun said, and he took her face in his hands, her strong, beautiful face that was almost level with his even though she was lying down. "Because I spent 8 years believing I killed the people I loved. My wife died in childbirth, and I blamed myself, every single day. I thought if I'd been faster getting the doctor, if I'd been richer so we could afford better help, if I'd been—" His voice broke. "I've been dead inside, Nola. Just breathing and working and waiting to die. And then your letters started coming. Your words. Your laugh on paper. Your stories about growing sunflowers and watching thunderstorms and dreaming about mountains. You made me want to live again. You made me want to be a man worth something. But You're my wife," he interrupted. "You're the woman who wrote me 17 letters over 6 months. The woman who was brave enough to leave everything she knew to marry a stranger. The woman who stepped off that train today, and when the whole town stared, you held your head high. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Nola. Not just your body, your heart." She was crying openly now, her muscular chest heaving with sobs she'd probably been holding back for years. "I thought you'd be disgusted," she whispered. When you saw me, really saw me, I thought you'd send me back. Never, Calhoun said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Never, you hear me? You're home now. This is your home. I'm your home. But then Magnolia's face crumpled in a new way, and she pressed her hand against her stomach. Calhoun, I want this. I want to be your wife in every way. But it hurts so much, and I don't know if I'm doing something wrong, if my body is wrong, if... That's when Calhoun understood. His virgin bride wasn't just afraid of disappointing him, she was afraid her own body was broken. That even this, the most intimate act between husband and wife, was something she was too different for, too wrong for. We're going to start over, he said firmly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Right now. We're going to start over, and I'm going to show you exactly how not wrong you are. Magnolia looked at him with desperate hope. How? Calhoun stood up and held out his hand to her. First, you're going to stand up. Then we're going to slow everything down. Way down. Because there's no rule that says a first night has to happen in one night. There's no rule that says we have to rush. And there's definitely no rule that says my wife should be in pain. She took his hand, her grip strong enough to crush bone, but gentle as a bird, and let him help her stand. Even with her standing and him on his feet, she was taller. He had to look up slightly to meet her eyes. I'm taller than you, she said, and it sounded like an apology. I noticed, he said, and smiled through his tears. Means when I kiss you, I get to feel like I'm reaching for something precious, something worth stretching for. Her eyes went wide, and before she could protest again, he pulled her down and kissed her. Soft, tender, like she was made of morning light, and he was afraid she'd disappear. When he pulled back, she was staring at him like he'd just performed a miracle. Now, Calhoun said, his voice steadier now. We're going to do this right. We're going to take our time. And you're going to tell me every single step if something hurts or feels wrong. Because this isn't about me taking from you, Nola. This is about us learning each other. Understanding each other. Can you do that? She nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. I don't know. I'm scared. So am I, he admitted. I'm terrified I'll hurt you. That I'll be too rough. That I won't know how to love you the way you deserve. You're scared? She looked genuinely shocked. But you've done this before. 8 years ago, he said. With a woman I loved, yes. But not with you. And you're not her, Nola. You're brand new. You're my second chance. And I'll be damned if I'm going to waste it by rushing. Something shifted in her expression. The fear didn't disappear, but something else appeared beside it. Trust. Fragile and new, but there. Okay, she whispered. Okay, teach me. Show me. I trust you, Calhoun. And that trust, coming from a woman who had every reason not to trust any man, hit him harder than any blow ever could. But he still had to keep his promise. He had to show his giant virgin bride that her first night didn't have to be filled with pain. That she wasn't broken. That she was, in fact, exactly perfect. The question was, could a lonely rancher who'd been dead inside for 8 years remember how to be gentle? Could he love her the way she needed? Could he prove to this magnificent woman that she was everything he'd waited for? The fire crackled, the wind howled, and Calhoun Ridgway took his wife's hand and led her back to the bed, determined to show her that sometimes the most powerful love starts with the gentlest touch. Calhoun guided Magnolia back to the bed, but this time he didn't rush. This time he moved like he had all the time in the world, because he did. They had their whole lives ahead of them. Sit down, he said softly, and she obeyed, perching on the edge of the bed like a bird ready to fly away at any moment. Her powerful legs were tense, her hands gripping her knees so hard her knuckles went white. He knelt in front of her, actually knelt, and began unlacing her boots. Heavy work boots, scuffed and worn, the kind a farm girl would wear because pretty shoes were a luxury she'd never been allowed. What are you doing? She asked, her voice uncertain. Taking care of my wife, he said simply. He pulled off one boot, then the other, setting them aside carefully. Then he took her left foot in his hands, even her feet were large, strong, and began to massage gently. Magnolia gasped. Calhoun, you don't have to. I want to, he interrupted. When's the last time anyone touched you gently, Nola? When's the last time someone treated you like you were precious instead of strange? She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Never. No one's ever. My whole life. People have either stared at me like I'm a circus attraction or avoided touching me altogether. Like I might break them. Well, I'm not afraid of you, Calhoun said, working his thumbs along her arch. And you're not going to break me. You understand that. You're strong, yes, but I'm not made of glass. Something in her shoulders relaxed slightly. He moved to her other foot, watching her face in the firelight. Her eyes were half closed now, and some of the tension was melting away. That feels good, she admitted quietly. Good, he said. Now tell me something. Tell me what you're really afraid of, not the pain. Something deeper. Magnolia was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Then, I'm afraid that even if we get past the pain, even if we do this right, you'll realize I'm not. I'm not a real woman. Not the kind men want. I'm too hard, too strong, not soft enough, not feminine enough. Calhoun's hands stilled on her foot. He looked up at her, and the raw vulnerability in her eyes made his chest ache. Who told you that? Everyone, she whispered. My father. The boys in town who'd laugh when I walked by. The men who'd see me at church and look away like I was shameful. Every person who ever saw me and decided I was wrong somehow. Calhoun stood up slowly and cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Then every single one of them was a fool. You want to know what I see when I look at you, Nola? I see a woman who survived a world that tried to tell her she didn't belong in it. I see strength that doesn't take away from beauty, it adds to it. I see someone real and alive and here. That's more woman than most men ever get to hold. A tear slipped down her cheek, and he caught it with his thumb. Now, he said, his voice dropping lower, gentler. I'm going to undress you, slowly, and you're going to breathe, just breathe. If anything feels wrong or scary, you say so. Deal? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Calhoun's hands moved to the buttons of her dress, dozens of tiny buttons running down her back, and he worked each one free with patience that made Magnolia's breath catch. She'd buttoned this dress herself just hours ago, her hands shaking with nerves, wondering if this would be the moment her new husband rejected her. Now those same buttons were coming undone, and instead of fear, she felt something else building inside her chest, something warm and terrifying and hopeful all at once. You're trembling, Calhoun whispered against her ear as he worked the last button free. So are you, she said back, and felt him smile against her neck. Yeah, he admitted. I am. Because you matter, Nola. This matters, and I don't want to get it wrong. The dress slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her waist, and Magnolia instinctively moved to cover herself. But Calhoun caught her hands gently, stopping her. Don't hide from me, he said. Please, let me see my wife. She forced herself to lower her arms, even though every instinct screamed at her to cover up, to hide the body that had brought her nothing but shame. She sat there in her simple cotton chemise, her powerful shoulders bare, her muscular arms exposed in the firelight. Calhoun didn't look away, didn't flinch, didn't show even a flicker of disappointment. Instead, he traced one finger along her shoulder, down her arm, following the curve of muscle that most men had mocked. Beautiful, he murmured. God, Nola, you're so beautiful it hurts to look at you. Don't lie to me, she said, but her voice cracked. Please don't lie just to make me feel better. I'm not, he said fiercely, meeting her eyes. I've never lied to you. Not in 17 letters, and I'm not starting now. You want to know what I see? I see arms that can hold me when the nightmares come. I see strength that won't break when this hard life tries to crush us. I see a woman built to last, built to survive, built to stand beside me through anything. He pressed his lips to her shoulder, then her collarbone, then the base of her throat. Soft kisses, reverent kisses, like he was worshipping at an altar. Magnolia's head fell back, and a sound escaped her throat, something between a sob and a gasp. Calhoun, I've got you, he whispered. I've got you, and I'm not letting go. His hands moved to the hem of her chemise, and he paused, waiting for permission. She nodded, and he lifted it slowly, carefully, until she sat before him in nothing but her bloomers, exposed, vulnerable, every inch of her unconventional body on display. The fire cast shadows across her skin, highlighting every curve of muscle, every freckle, every part of her that society had told her was wrong. Calhoun stood back and looked at her. Really looked, and Magnolia watched his face for disgust, for hesitation, for any sign that he regretted his choice. Instead, his eyes filled with tears again. "You're crying again," she said, confused. "Why do you keep crying?" "Because I'm looking at a miracle," he said roughly. "Because 8 years ago I thought God had abandoned me, and now I realize he was just making you. Taking his time to build someone strong enough to help me carry all this grief I've been drowning in. Someone brave enough to love a broken man." "You're not broken," Magnolia protested. "Neither are you," he shot back. "So stop believing you are." He began unbuttoning his own shirt, and Magnolia's breath quickened. She'd never seen a man undress before, never been allowed to look. Her father had made sure she understood that her size, her strength, her very existence meant she didn't deserve these moments. But here was Calhoun, standing before her shirtless, showing her his own scars, a jagged line across his ribs from a ranching accident, burn marks on his forearm, the weathered skin of a man who'd worked hard his whole life. "We're both scared," he said. "We're both damaged. We're both convinced we're not enough. But maybe, Nola, maybe together we're exactly what we need to be." He moved toward her, and this time when he guided her back onto the bed, she didn't tense up. She let him position her gently on the furs, let him settle beside her, his body warm against hers. "Now," he whispered, his hand resting on her stomach, feeling it rise and fall with her nervous breathing. "Now we take this slow. Now we learn each other. And if it hurts, I'll tell you," she promised. "I trust you, Calhoun. I'm still scared, but I trust you." Calhoun's hands moved across her skin like he was memorizing a map, gentle, exploratory, patient. He traced the lines of her arms, the breadth of her shoulders, the curve of her waist. Every touch was a question, and every sigh from Magnolia was an answer. "You're so tense," he murmured against her neck. "Breathe with me, Nola, in and out, just like that." They breathed together, their chests rising and falling in rhythm, and slowly, so slowly, Magnolia felt her body begin to relax. The fear didn't disappear completely, but it softened around the edges, making room for something else. Something that felt like warmth spreading through her veins. "Better?" he asked, his lips brushing her ear. "Better," she whispered back. "But Calhoun, I still don't know if I can, if we can." "We can," he said with quiet certainty. "But not because we're rushing.